And Tim is another one of these Navy guys. We seem to be just flooded with Navy guys around here. Used to at least Army had a couple of us, but now we're sorely outnumbered. And Tim also served on aircraft carrier, the USS Midway, with the 7th Fleet from 1984 to 1988. So without further ado, Tim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Mike. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Am I good? Okay. Good morning. Good morning. My name's Tim Hutchinson. I am the Broomfield County Veteran Service Officer. I work out of the Broomfield Workforce Center over on Spader Way. So what does that mean exactly? Well, I do not work for the VA. So no disrespect to my VA brothers and sisters, but I work, basically I consider myself an advocate and I work on behalf of the veteran. So I'm trying to help veterans get the benefits they deserve, whereas the VA will take your claim and they'll do all those things, but they really won't guide you on how to be successful with the claim. So that's something that differentiates the county and the state service officers with the service officers that are at the VA. So I work with the Colorado Division of Veterans Affairs. So I'm actually under their accreditation. So how it works is when it comes to the claim process, the veteran is represented through the whole process all the way. If they have to go to appeal, the Colorado Division of Veterans Affairs takes over at that point and represents you in the appeal process. So you're represented through the entire process. Even if you have to do a hearing with a BVA judge through teleconference, you're represented through the entire process. So that's a good thing. So how can we help? We can help assist you in the development and filing of your claim, right? Guide you on the evidence gathering. We could request service records if we don't feel that there's something in there that the VA kind of has skipped over or something that's in there that will benefit you. Corrections of DD-214s or issuance of medals. You may have had a medal issued while you were, for the period you were in, but it wasn't issued until after you were out. We could file for a request to get that updated and an issuance of a DD-215, which is a correction to the DD-214, or to get a copy of your DD-214. So if you go to the archives and on archives.gov, there is a veteran section where you can request a copy of a DD-214. When they send it to you, it has an emboss on there from the Archives Administration. That emboss makes it as good as an original. So if you ever get that, make sure you don't inadvertently hand it and give it to someone, because that embossing on there makes it as good as an original, so you don't ever want to get rid of that. There's 3 divisions that make up the VA, right? So you got the Benefits Administration. So all non-medical VA benefits, so compensation, pension, education, home loans, voc rehab, rehab and employment, and life insurance is all administered through the local VA regional offices, okay? So that is the Benefits Administration. That is the one where you're going to deal with. And a lot of times there's veterans I deal with said, well, I put in a change of address at the benefits, but they still got it wrong over at the healthcare side. Well, guess what? You have to let them know too. Those two don't talk back and forth very well. So then the Health Administration, all the VA healthcare services. So the VA medical centers, community-based outpatient clinics, okay? Those are all part of the Health Administration and underneath the Health Administration rules and regulations as far as that goes. And then, of course, the Cemetery Administration. So all the national and state cemeteries, so you get, they give the support to the state veteran cemeteries. You can get ordered the headstones, markers, burials. All those things are through the Cemetery Administration. Those are the 3 major divisions of the VA. So you want to make sure that any requests that you make are going to the right division there. So let's talk a minute about service-connected disabilities. So there is a lot of questions I get about service-connected disabilities. What's considered service-connected? Well, a service-connected disability is any disability or resulting from disease or injury incurred or aggravated while on active service. So aggravation, so even if it's on your entrance physical, that they noted it, but then they say, you're fine for enlistment, and you aggravate that while you're in, that's something that you can definitely file a claim for. Torn knee ligaments, hearing loss, back conditions, those are just some examples. There's lots of examples of service-connected disabilities. Do they have to be in, can it happen when you're playing basketball? Yes, if you're on active duty and you played basketball and hurt yourself, you're still eligible for compensation, or to at least file a compensation claim and see if you can show that it is service-connected. The key here is service connection. So there's three things for any claim. You have to have an event or injury in service, a diagnosed medical condition, and then a medical nexus between that injury or duty and that condition that you were diagnosed with. Those are the three things needed for any VA claim. Unless there is a presumption for that condition, which we'll go over, but presumption means, hey, if you served during a certain time period and you have this disease, and if you served in the area that presumption is related to, then you can get that disability. So presumption is a key factor as well. So it's a tax-free monetary benefit, right? So it's paid for a service-connected disability. So it may be if you're a veteran that you had have a service-connected disability, and if you're very seriously disabled or you have certain qualifying dependents, you can get additional compensation. Everyone's probably heard of aid and attendance and special monthly compensations. Those are also monetary benefits paid on top of the disability claim. So it's extra compensation because of the level of disability, and that may come after years, or that may be something right out of the gate when you get your disability rating. Okay. So filing a claim, in filing a claim for the VA, everything has to be on a standardized form. It used to be back in the day, you could put in an intent to file a claim on a napkin if you wanted to, and send it in. So the VA does not accept that anymore. You have to have a standardized claim. So the main forms, is the 526EZ for any new or reevaluation of a condition that you have. You have hearing loss, you've had hearing loss for years, you're service connected for it, and hey, I think I want a reevaluation. I think my hearing has got worse. You have to use the 526EZ. If you filed for a claim a while back and you were denied, and then you got frustrated or whatever, and you said, forget it. And then later on you decide, hey, I want to revisit this thing. It's been, 10 years, but I want to revisit it. I think I got enough evidence to show that this is related to service. Well, you have to use the 0995, which is a supplemental claim. It's part of the new appeal process, okay? So the supplemental claim form is the one that you're going to use for anything that was previously denied, so that the VA can start the process of anything. So that becomes tricky, and here's why. Someone might come and see me, and they might say, yeah, I want to file these, and I ask them, have you ever been denied? Have you ever filed any of these? And they say, no, I don't think so. So we go ahead and file the claim on the 526EZ. Well, they're going to get a notice back and say, hey, guess what? 20 years ago, you filed this and were denied. You need to put it on the right form. So we want to make sure that we kind of do our due diligence and look and see if you were previously denied for a condition before we file for it. If you think you have, then we could file an intent to file to protect the date that we start the process, and I can get access to your file and hopefully can look in there and see anything that you were denied for and why. The key is why, right? If you were denied for something and why you were denied is going to be key so that we can figure out how to proceed and try to get this thing service connected. The VA has an obligation, a duty to assist, and they need to let you know if there's why they denied you, number one, but if there's any other evidence out there that may benefit you, they're supposed to let you know in that process, right? And if they don't do that, well, then that is a duty to assist error on their part, and we could try to get a higher level review of that. A higher level review is part of the new appeals process. So a higher level review is you have it's similar to the old notice of disagreement process, but it seems to be going much faster right now. The notice of disagreements, I was doing some of those that took sometimes 2 years to get an answer back. So imagine waiting 2 years just for them to say, nah, we don't think it's service connected. Well, the higher level review is an informal conference where the decision review officer calls me on the phone and we have a discussion of why we feel that they erred in that decision. Whether it's evidence, if it's a law, so if it's error of fact or law, that is the route that we want to go. If there is no error of fact or law, then you want to go back to the supplemental claim and submit more evidence, is all. So you'll submit additional evidence and use the supplemental claim process. So they've kind of changed how they do the appeal process, and it's actually, I think, going to be a better process than what they've had in the past. They still have the regular appeal, which goes to a BVA judge, but there's 3 different lanes for that as well. One is they just look at the claim to see if it should be, if there's a mistake there, or if the judge thinks, hey, there's enough evidence to grant this. Another one is you submit some evidence and the judge looks at it. And then the third lane is you submit evidence and you just get in front of a judge to give your testimony. So a lot of times if there's nothing in your service record that shows that you had an injury, you want to get in front of a judge under oath and say, here's what happened. Even though it's not in any medical file, here's what happened to me. And this is why, we never went, to be seen for it. And the judge will give that a lot more relevance and a lot more weight on that and credibility on that testimony than the VA will when they're doing their claims process. So the appeal process a lot of times is sometimes going straight to that appeal and going before a judge is the next step. A lot of times with hearing claims, you want to get right to the judge, because here's why. When you file a hearing loss claim with the VA, they're going to look at your entrance physical hearing test and your exit physical hearing test. And if there is no threshold shifts on the frequencies, right, for the decibels, if there's no threshold shift, they're going to deny it 9 times out of 10. And so what you have to do is say, we're going to continue with this. We're going to fight it. We're going to go on, because the judge understands that new science says that even exposure to that loud noise, later on, it exacerbates regular age-related hearing loss, right? So everyone has a certain amount. You get age-related hearing loss, but it makes it much worse when you're exposed to noise, high thresholds of noise, hazardous noise levels prior to that. So it could have been for a short period of time many years ago, and it's still going to complicate things in the long run when the age-related hearing loss starts coming. So after you submit an application, the VA they'll review the application, and then they'll schedule a VA examination if necessary. They'll gather what evidence. A lot of times the VA, they have to go right and request from the archives your service records, your treatment records, okay? And when they do that, they might not get a response back right away, okay? So they're going to request again and again and again, and it makes it look like the VA is taking a long time to do your claim. Well, it's really not. They can't move any further until they get those service records, and sometimes they have a tough time even getting an answer from the archives, okay? So that's the first step, is once they get the records and stuff, they can verify service, verify different things, and then they could start requesting examinations. Then what they do is they'll look at the examinations, they'll look at the service record, then they'll prepare a decision using all that evidence. And that decision is going to be based on all the evidence of record, okay? And then they'll prepare the award of benefits or a disallowance document. So they're just going to say, yes, it's granted, or no, you're denied, and here's why. Now, the new rules, they have to give you any favorable findings that they have. Any favorable findings that they find in this process, they have to put on that decision rating sheet so that you could see that these are the favorable portions of that whole process. So you could say, okay, this is favorable, but they denied it, and why? And then when you look at why they denied it, you try to see if we can rectify that somehow. The veteran's pension. It's paid to wartime veterans with limited income who are permanently and totally disabled or age 65 or older. So at age 65 or older, you're considered permanently and totally disabled.
Wow.
In the VA's eyes, anyway. So, but that's the rule there. Well, I'm not too far from there. I'm heading that way. So you have to have served during a period of war. I took out the older periods, World War I and before, Spanish American and all that, but just to make the slides a little more friendlier, and the slides are more to keep me on track, so bear that in mind there. So these are the periods of time that you had to have served in order to be eligible for that pension. And it is, like I said, a needs-based benefit, okay? So it has to be, you have to meet the criteria in order to qualify for the pension. Veterans and survivors who are eligible for a VA pension and require aid and attendance of another person or are housebound may be eligible for additional monetary payment. So a lot of times people have heard of aid and attendance, right? Well, aid and attendance isn't a benefit in itself. It is, you have to qualify for the pension before you can get the aid and attendance. So it's all tied to income and assets, okay? So, but it makes the threshold, if you are eligible for aid and attendance or housebound, then the maximum allowable pension rate increases a little bit. So this is the new maximum allowable pension rate. So I picked the aid and attendance with one dependent. If you are a veteran by yourself and don't need aid and attendance, $13,752 is the maximum amount that you can make, before you're considered over income for this benefit. Now, if you make $13,000, then the VA will pay the difference. So you'll get $752 a year over 12 checks. But the good thing is if you keep track, if you qualify for this benefit and keep track of allowable medical expenses, you can file a claim, a supplemental form at the end of the year in order to get that that amount increased due to your actual costs for health care costs. But if you have a dependent and you need aid and attendance, it goes up to the $27,195. Where this benefit really comes into play a lot of times is when a veteran has to go into an assisted living or a nursing home type facility, because then the whole cost of that facility can be deducted from your countable income. So if you make $27,000 or $28,000 a year, but you're paying $3,500 a month for the assisted living facility, well, then you're actually underwater as far as what you're paying every year compared to your income, and you're dipping into your assets, right, to pay the difference. So this would be a benefit that at that time would be very beneficial. It would help those assets go longer. You know, they're not going to, so $27,195, so I think it's like $2,200 a month that you would be eligible for if you qualified for the full benefit.
And what state? What's the asset level that you're allowed?
So under the new rules, it used to be 80,000, okay? But now what they're doing is they're looking at all your assets and your yearly income combined. And that has to be, I believe it's $126,000 and $800, somewhere around there. It's higher, but that includes that yearly income as well, right? So now they take that yearly income and they put it in there. It's more in line with, like, say, the Medicaid thresholds than it used to be before. So the 128,000 or 126,800 roughly is the amount, full amount, including the assets and the income. All assets are looked at. Retirement, you name it, all income is looked at. Yes.
The yearly income, is that your AGI?
So they're looking at gross income for the year. They're going to pull your taxes and look at it. So I believe that is what they look at. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But again, they're looking at assets and income for the year. So if they all combine and they're less than that 126,000, then you should be good to be able to. And remember, if you have a lot of medical expenses that you can deduct that you can deduct from your countable income. So if you have $30,000 a year in income with Social Security, retirement, and all that, the money that you pay for health insurance premiums and for in-home care, those types of things can be deducted from that income. So the survivor's pension benefit or death pension is also, it's the survivor's portion of the same program, okay? So the requirements are the same for the periods of service, right? Except look at the amounts. They are way lower, right? So a spouse, a spouse that has no dependent or anything, $9,224 is the maximum you can make before you're over income for this benefit. So again, if you do need aid and attendance, it's $14,000, so roughly $1,200 a month for this benefit if you qualify for the full amount. So the thresholds for the surviving spouse are much lower than it is for the veteran. But again, if they're in a nursing home or an assisted living facility, the amount you pay for that facility can all be deducted from your income, right? So if your monthly income is $1,200, but the facility costs $3,000, again, you're underwater for the income, and as long as your assets are under the limitation, you'll qualify for the full benefit amount. But you can see it's much lower. So dependent indemnity compensation, okay? So the dependent indemnity compensation is a one that we really want to talk about here a little bit because of the new Blue Water Navy Act, right? So if a spouse of a Blue Water Navy veteran passed away and that veteran, or if the veteran passed away and that veteran passed away from one of the presumptive illnesses, she has a right to file for that claim for dependent indemnity compensation because that death can be deemed service-connected. Okay, so there's a lot that's going to go into that, and the VA this just started January 1st. It actually started prior to this, but the VA backed it up until January 1st, which is when the actual law took effect. Okay, so there was an appeal from a circuit court that earlier in the year that should have changed everything, but the VA put everything on hold, and a lot of Blue Water veterans were getting a letter that says until we get further instruction, your claim's on hold. So, but it's the first of the year. It's time to start thinking. But a surviving spouse who was the spouse of a Blue Water Navy veteran is now eligible for the same types of benefits as the boots on the ground veterans. So the DIC comes into play if we can service connect the cause of death. So a lot of times that's going to be looking at the death certificate, and if they had diabetes and it's not mentioned on the death certificate, if the death certificate gets amended that shows that diabetes was a major contributing factor, then that spouse has a good claim for dependent indemnity compensation.
What constitutes a blue water navy?
So I have the slides on that. We'll go over that. But 12 nautical miles. If you served within 12 nautical miles of the Vietnamese, well, it's the international waters, which is 12 nautical miles from Vietnam, right? So if you served within that, you're eligible for the benefits, right? Now what they're doing now is taking a lot of logbooks and trying to get the exact places that these ships were at, and the Blue Water Navy veterans have done a great job in having a ship list that shows a lot of the different logbooks that shows where these ships were. So they've been working really hard at getting all this information gathered, right? Gathering all this data and putting it out there so that anyone that has a claim can go to their site and kind of search for their ship and then see if there's a link there that shows the exact logbook entry that shows where they served, where they were at during a certain time frame, right? So it may have been where, you served on a ship during a certain period, and right there in the logbook, May of 1968, it shows that you were inside that boundary, right? Then that is eligible for to put in a good claim for benefits. If you have, now you have to have one of the disabilities associated with it, right? So if you don't have any of the disabilities associated with Agent Orange, then there's really no claim, because you have to have a disability to file for a claim. Any questions on DIC?
I just have one question.
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking right now about blue water. What about brown water?
So brown water is already in that, because they have a list of all the brown water ships, right? So brown water is essentially already part of the presumptive process. So they get the presumptions based on where they were located, because brown water, you're going to be now definitely within the 12 nautical miles, and they have a pretty good ship list on the VA site. So they are eligible for the presumption too. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes.
I have 4 of the presumptive diseases from Agent Orange.
Mm-hmm.
And recently I had an interview with LHI. Are you familiar with LHI?
Yes.
And they said my hypertension would be probably tacked onto either my cancer or my heart disease. Or not heart disease, diabetes. Is it LHI on our side?
So LHI is a contracted provider that does the exams, right? So they might say one thing, and then when you get the exam back, it may say another. I wish I could count how many times I've had someone say, hey, they said this, that, and then I look at the actual C&P exam, and I'm like, that's not what they're saying here. So hypertension isn't one of them. It should be, same as bladder cancer, right? It should be presumptive for Agent Orange. The evidence is there, but they're not.
It's not approved.
Right, they're not giving it as presumptive. However, the VA will look at that, and if they feel that the doctor says it's at least as likely as not related to diabetes, or at least as likely as not related to heart condition, right? Then they'll grant that usually, right? But I've had some granted and some, denied. So it's kind of all depends on that examiner, right? But the good thing is hopefully they go ahead and pass. They've been sitting there with these other conditions that should be considered presumptive, and they have not yet went ahead and approved that. And I don't know why they're dragging their feet on that, but it is one that the evidence shows that it is related to Agent Orange.
I started with Diane in the VSO office in Lakewood, I guess it is.
Yep.
And it seems like they're actually processing my Blue Water Navy claim now. But I heard some people say they're not going to process until after this month.
So That I don't know for sure. I know that January 1st, 2020, it's supposed to be, game on as far as that goes. But if you do get a letter back stating that, they're waiting for further direction, then that's what they're doing, right? So it's just gonna depend. And Diane is in Jefferson County now, by the way. Did you know that?
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
I used to.
Right. Yes.
A long time ago, they claimed that there was a fire in Kansas City and all your records got burnt up. What do you do about that?
So in St. Louis, so yes, there was a fire there, and the issue with that is if you file a claim and it gets denied, you're just going to have to keep fighting it and take it all the way to the judge, because the VA, if they don't have the records, they're going to usually deny the claim, right? You can make, what I would do is, make sure that you make a good statement in support of claim that is very accurate on what you're trying to claim and how you were injured or what you were exposed to. And, if they deny it, then you just keep going all the way up to the Board of Veterans Appeals, because there's really nothing, they lost over 1 million records at that time. So, and, it's not the veteran's fault, but I've had veterans that, weren't even granted examinations because they might have filed for hearing loss, but they had a job that didn't expose them to hazardous noise as far as the VA is concerned, right? So as far as the military is concerned. So they won't grant that examination because there's no evidence that shows that they were exposed to loud noise, and there's nothing there. Mm-hmm.
When was that fire?
72, I believe. I believe it was 1972.
Tim, didn't that cover, well, I guess I should ask the question, what branches of service did that fire impact?
I believe it was mostly Air Force and Army.
Mostly Army, and then a block of Air Force.
Okay, mostly Army.
Discharged, I think, prior to around the early 60s.
Yeah.
There wasn't too many Air Force records, but a lot of Army.
Yep.
The Air Force came up to, from A to Hubbard, Hubbard, I think is how it's spelled.
Right.
And anybody from Hubbard on is, their records are supposedly there. You can also request that the service, the veteran that you're dealing with, check to make sure there's any hospital records, because those are separate from your service records, your regular jacket.
Correct. But the problem is you have to come up with a pretty good time frame of when you were in that hospital 50 years ago or so. So yeah, it was August 8th, and so they'll only look for a certain amount of time. But if you give them, there's a form that you fill out if they don't have your records, and you try and give them as much information as possible to piece it together, right? And they'll do that, and then if they come back and deny it, then you go to the board, because as far as the judge is concerned, they need their duty to assist. They need to search a bigger parameter than that 60 days they're searching. So you're better off going once, but you got to follow that process through. A lot of times veterans get frustrated and they don't want to pursue it any further than after that denial or the second denial, and they're like, "Nah, I'm done." Well, you got to go. You got to keep it going. You got to take it all the way to that BVA judge, and let him make a determination, because obviously those records being lost are no fault of the veteran, right? So that's it's unfortunate for sure, but it's the reality that a lot of those don't exist, but they can try to piece together whatever they can. If you happen to have a copy of any of your service records, hey, we could furnish them. Say, hey, look what I got. You don't have them, but I do. So, alrighty. So here's something. It's called the widow's tax, right? The widow tax. So if you do get granted DIC and you are receiving the survivor benefit plan or the from the retirement, right? What they'll do is they'll offset that VA benefit, right, by the amount of, say you're getting $1,200 in survivor benefit plan from the veteran's retirement, military retirement. They paid into the survivor benefit plan. Well, they're only going to pay the difference. They're going to pay you the difference between the $1,319 and the $1,200. So they're only going to pay $119. They're trying to get this changed. There is legislation pending. They consider it unfair. They call it the widow tax because they're taking and offsetting the disability. The disability and retirement should be two separate things. But as you know, if you're service connected less than 50% and you're receiving retirement, they offset your VA benefit money based on your retirement. So they're trying to change this. I think it's unfortunate, but that they do this. But hopefully this gets changed so that surviving spouses can get all that they deserve. So long-term care, right? So long-term care at the VA and in the state veterans homes and the community living centers, you know, they have a priority. So the highest priority veterans are first. If you're 70% service connected or more, or if the service connected disability is the reason you need that care. So it could be less than 70%, but if you need that care because of that disability, you get preference in the VA homes, right, for long-term care. Spouses, surviving spouses and spouses and Gold Star mothers are also eligible, right? The amount is pretty expensive. I think for a spouse was like $10,500 at Fitzsimmons a month, right? Last I checked, so I stopped checking. It's pretty expensive. The main thing is there's a form 1010EC that you could fill out, and based on your income and everything, you submit that through the VA, and they will let you know what your co-payment responsibility would be. So there is a form that you can fill out and submit, and they will figure out based on income and all that what your co-payment responsibility would be for a long-term care facility, the veterans long-term care facility.
Do they also look at the value of your house or other assets, or is it strictly your...
Well, I think they look at a lot of things like that, just like Medicaid would, right? But I don't know how they, how they go about looking at that as far as if they're going to do like Medicaid does and take that house and sell it, in order for that. Because normally it's, the 70% or more service-connected veterans have the priority, so I don't know how much private pay goes on, at the facility. The best thing to do is talk straight to one of the facilities because it changes so much that they have the best knowledge of what is required and how they go about figuring the copay amount, so. And they're pretty good. Most of the administrators for the different ones, they got them in Home Lake, Walsenburg. They're around the state. The state facilities, and the people there are great. So if you ask and you have questions, they'll bring you in to take a walk around and give you a tour. But they'll definitely answer any questions you have. They are really accommodating and they're really great people. They come out every year to when we have our training, and they're just wonderful.
How do you find out where these facilities are?
So the VA.gov site is the best place to go. If you're looking at anything VA, if you go to VA.gov and just search whatever you're looking for in the search bar, it'll come up. Otherwise, if you have trouble navigating that or whatever, you can call a VSO. You can call me, and I will look it up. If I don't know answers to stuff, which is quite often, I will definitely look it up and try to find you the best information and most current information out there. So here's another one that we talk about a lot, VA healthcare. So enrollment and eligibility, right? Purple Heart recipients, they're enrolled in VA healthcare. You can enroll in VA healthcare if you have a Purple Heart. Service-connected disabled veterans, you can enroll and you got VA healthcare, right? Recently discharged combat veterans, you got 5 years of VA healthcare. Recently discharged veterans, 1 year of VA healthcare. Vietnam veterans, Gulf War veterans, and if you served at Camp Lejeune during that time frame there, you're eligible for VA healthcare.
What went on at Camp Lejeune?
contaminated water. So there was a lot of chemicals from I think it was a dry cleaning facility that got into the drinking water, groundwater, drinking water, and caused a lot of health problems. So, and that's not just Camp Lejeune, that's the other bases, surrounding it. It's not just Camp Lejeune itself. I forget some of the names of the bases around there.
Tim?
Yes.
Recently discharged veterans.
Yes.
Okay, combat 5 years,
Mhm.
non-combat 1 year. Okay, so is that now automatic? As soon as they come out, they get that?
They have to go and apply for VA healthcare. They enroll in the, they fill out the 1010 EZ stating with a copy of their DD-214 showing that they're just recently discharged, and they'll set them up with a primary care.
And then what happens after 5 years or after 1 year?
Well, it depends. If they're in 1 year and then they file a Service-Connected disability claim and they get a Service-Connected disability, then they're in the VA healthcare system. Same thing with the discharged combat veterans. But other than that, other than these here for enrollment in the VA, then it is financial qualification,
I see.
right?
All right, so that still applies.
So I downloaded this. Let's hope this is the most current since I downloaded it last night, right? So if you're the veteran only, it is $57,200 that you can have in the Broomfield. This is Broomfield County. Other counties would be a little different, but so $57,200 is your maximum amount of income, okay, that you can have. If you're below that threshold in your income, just income we're talking, then you qualify. You should put in for VA healthcare if you feel that you want it. And I would suggest anyone that is eligible should do it. And there is benefits to VA healthcare, and a lot of it is programs that they have to keep the veteran in their house as long as possible in case there's any type of health setbacks, right? The only thing you have to do to be active in VA healthcare is go once a year for a physical. And actually once every 2 years being seen by the VA is really the requirement, but I say go every year for a physical and be done with it and stay active in the VA healthcare system. If you have a dependent, so if it's a veteran and a spouse, then the maximum amount here in Broomfield is $65,340 a year. If you make less than that in income, you should apply for VA healthcare. Because the only ways to get in the system are through one of these, right? Or by financial qualification. Not every veteran is just accepted into the VA healthcare system, You have to meet the eligibility criteria. Yeah.
And go back one slide.
Mm-hmm.
We get NAM veterans automatically.
Yes, because of the exposures to Agent Orange, they can enroll into the VA healthcare system.
But you don't have financial qualification.
You don't. Well, it's going to depend. They're going to look at financials for the amount of copay you might have to pay, right? But normally, I believe that when Vietnam veterans are in there, there's no copay because of the types of exposures you're exposed to. Yes.
Does that include Vietnam era veterans who served somewhere else?
No. It has to be boots on the ground in Vietnam or Blue Water Navy, right? Some of those, because of the exposures that Agent Orange, right? That is why they allow them in the healthcare system. Frank, do you want some?
Yeah, are they going to recognize that 12-mile limit?
For healthcare?
Yeah, for the healthcare.
Yes.
Or is it any guy who might have been on a supply ship or an aircraft carrier out in Yankee Station or Dixie Station, and they were never beyond the 12-mile limit or within?
So as of right now, if you're in the 12 nautical mile limit, then you're going to be eligible for the VA healthcare. Right now, they're not. You'll have to meet the financial qualifications if you're outside that 12 mile limit. Is how it is now. That from what I've read.
So having the service medal is not going to be the determining factor?
No, because they're going to look. They're going to look at where you were in there, and if you're inside, that's where these ship logs, these deck logs, are going to come into big play. Is to show that you were inside that that perimeter.
Okay, yeah, I can see a lot of pushback on that.
Yep.
13 miles.
So also caregiver support program. So there's changes coming to the caregiver support program. As of right now, the caregiver support program is for post 9/11 veterans and their families only. But as of January 1st, under the new or the Mission Act, passed last year, they're expanding that, right? But the expansion doesn't really start till the summer of 2020. So I looked last night at the latest information, and they have not expanded it yet. And they, which is going to open it up to veterans of all eras that need the type of care, and someone could be designated as that caregiver. So the caregiver program is going to be expanded. It is going to be important, but the VA hasn't even figured out what that's all going to look like yet. So it's coming. And so I don't have any information of what this is going to look like and who's eligible, but they're supposed to roll it out in phases. So different eras, they're going to roll out the caregiver, right, for people who served in the different eras. And I don't even know who's first, but it makes sense to me that you would go furthest back, right, and start there. But then again, we're dealing with the VA. No disrespect to the VA. They have their, their way of doing things and their reasons behind it. So however they're going to do it, they're going to do it. Yes?
Okay, this sounds similar to the Veteran Direct Care program. Is that kind of like that?
So I'm not sure if Veteran Direct Care. Are you talking the caregiver support? So caregiver support program is for that as a stipend paid to the caregiver that's taken care.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be kind of similar to what we're talking about?
So that's what this is. It's expanding that program, right? So if it's PCAFC, if it's that program of comprehensive assistance for family caregivers, if that program falls under this one, yes, it's going to be expanded. So it's the caregiver program for the post 9/11 veterans that is being expanded. So that's, like I said, I don't know. They may come out with different criteria. They may come out with different programs for each era. I'm not sure how they're going to do it yet. But I believe that is the same. If it falls under that caregiver program, yes, then it's very similar to what they're going to expand.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So registry. So I don't know if you've ever heard, hey, you should file for the VA registry, or if you ever got a letter from the VA saying you should file for you should get on the VA registry. So the VA Environmental Health Registry is for any of these conditions here, right? Exposure to Agent Orange, if you were in the Gulf, the Airborne Hazards and Open Pit Registry for people that were around the any airborne hazards or open burn pits, ionizing radiation, right? Depleted uranium follow-up program, which is pretty much, I believe, Gulf War and on from that one, so to current. And then Toxic Embedded Fragment Surveillance Center, which is shrapnel, things like that, that's in your body. They want to kind of keep an eye on that, right? And the main goal of the registry and the reason why they're important is they look at each one of these eras and different things and look at the types, the clusters of diseases and illnesses that are brought about from those, right? So if you have a bunch of veterans saying, hey, the depleted uranium follow-up program, all these veterans are having this condition, then it's time to commission a study and see if it's related to that condition, and then that's how they're going to come about making it presumptive for those that are exposed to it. So Agent Orange registry, if you're exposed to Agent Orange, it's probably pretty good to get on there so that they can look at what the illnesses are and see if they should make that presumptive, commission a study and saying, hey, we see a cluster of this disease, we want to now do some scientific research and see if that's related to Agent Orange. And so the registries are important for that, so you want to keep it updated if you get a health condition later on after you're on the registry, you want to keep that updated and say, here's what's going on. I got recently diagnosed with this condition, so that they understand that maybe there's a possibility that they should commission a study for that. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm sorry to keep-
no, that's
What
right.
about asbestos?
So asbestos is a different one. If you have, so a lot of times, people that were exposed to certain types of, in their jobs, right? So firemen type in the Navy, people that did demolition, right? Demolition of buildings, those types of things that were exposed, could have been exposed during the demolition process to asbestos. There's really no registry for that, but you know, asbestosis, right, can be, they can diagnose that, right? And if you have a lung disease that's related to asbestos and you feel it's related to military service, then you should file a claim. So they don't necessarily, they know that asbestos is bad for you. So it's, if you're exposed to asbestos, in the performance, I mean, some in the Navy, some of the firemen, they make them go down there and scrub the inside of the boilers. It's all asbestos. They're breathing that stuff, right? So if they come down with asbestosis or mesothelioma, right, then they can file a claim for that. I would say if you have something that's related to asbestos and you were exposed to it in the military, file the claim.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Explain ionizing radiation.
So ionizing radiation, there's a lot of places that veterans were exposed to radiation through nuclear testing, right, atomic testing. And so certain areas, certain islands, certain places, and the VA.gov site has a huge page with a lot of different areas that was that they could have been exposed to that. So it's one of those where back in the day, people were in very close proximity to those tests, you know, more so than, you know, they were part of the tests. So that's what that is. That, you know, if you feel you're exposed to that, you want to get on that that registry as well. And there's a lot of different areas that is about, that pertains to.
And I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Depleted uranium, for instance.
So what?
Handling ammunition that was depleted uranium.
Right. So what they're looking at is, and really what they're looking at is those that were in a vehicle that got hit with it, or those that were in there trying to pull out survivors of a vehicle that was hit, or those that did cleanup of vehicles that were hit with the depleted uranium, right, rounds. That's who really they're looking at here that they want on that registry.
Because that's fragmented.
Right.
Not just handling ammunition.
No, it's the one that's fragmented that hit a target and the people are actually inside it or are salvaging it, those that are around it afterwards or during it. Harry Moore, he is our environmental health coordinator. So if you ever want to get on any of the registries, Harry Moore is the one to call and set that up. He's at the Golden Outpatient Clinic, and he takes appointments. They're pretty far out, but if you want to get on any of the registries, he is the one to coordinate that with. And out in Grand Junction, Lori is the one that takes care of it there. But he is the environmental health coordinator and will do all the registries here in this area. And that came right off the VA site. So a lot of this information came right off the VA site. So it's a great site. They do have tons of information. Burial benefits. So national cemeteries, right? A lot of times if a veteran has passed, depending on the last wishes, the funeral director can set up a lot of the burial benefits. So what they could do is they can get the flag, they can do the military honors, make sure that the honor guard is there. A lot of times if it's going to be burial on one of the national cemeteries, they could set up the, the headstones. If it's in a private cemetery, then you would have to file for the headstone, or if you already have a headstone, you can get or you can get a marker, a flat marker, right? Or if you have a headstone, you can get a medallion that goes on there that says that you were a veteran. All of those are easily applied for, right? The presidential memorial certificates is a real simple form that you send in, and you get a number of them that you can give to family members. Anybody can file for that. Most of these you need to send a DD-214 with the application and death certificate for some of them. But funeral directors, depending on the last wishes of the veteran, funeral directors will usually set up most of this stuff. They have a direct line for the military honors, and they can go right to the post office. That's where they pick up the burial flags.
Question.
Yes?
So what now, because it's changed,
Mhm.
it changes over the years, what constitutes military honors?
So they'll come and they'll do the folding of the flag and the playing of taps, right? And so that's usually what that entails. So
They used to provide the rifle squad.
So they don't necessarily do that. That's going to all depend on who the veteran is, or what the status of the veteran is. So, but a lot of times they'll just come to, they have to send at least 2 people to be able to fold the flag. The playing of taps, whether it's recorded or with a bugle or the bugle with the insert, they'll do that. But as far as the rifle salute, most of the time you'll want to get a hold of the American Legion Department, right, or the VFW Department, and see if they can provide one. So the State Department is the best one to call, because they can coordinate that, and a lot of times the funeral directors have those numbers too to try and set that up. So burial cost reimbursement, a lot of people ask this question, but you have to meet certain criteria to get a reimbursement, right? So one of them is if you're service connected or not, if you have a service connected disability. If you don't have a service connected disability, you didn't die in a VA hospital, or you weren't en route to or from a VA facility, chances are you're not eligible. Whoever paid for that is not eligible for a reimbursement. You have to meet certain criteria to get that reimbursement. Not all veterans are eligible for it. If it's a service-related death, if the veteran passes from a service-related, there's a $2,000 allowance that is set for that. Sometimes you're going to have to file for that, show that it was service-related, service-connected, excuse me. I have to change that to service-connected. But the $2,000 is for service-connected because they passed of a service-connected, related to a service-connected condition. If they're service-connected for a disability, but the death isn't service-connected, they'll pay $300 for burial allowance and up to $762 for a plot. I don't know where they come up with 762, but. And then a VA hospitalized veteran, if he was hospitalized by the VA when he or she died, the VA will pay up to $762 burial allowance and $762 for a plot. So it's just going to depend on the circumstances and if the veteran was or was not service connected at that time. So here's the Blue Water Navy. Here's the points that really I wanted to hit today. So it extends the presumption of herbicide exposure to brown water Navy veterans who served in the Republic of Vietnam and the offshore waters, 12 nautical miles, which is considered international waters, right? Inside the international water boundary or the air above, right? So if you're flying in the air above, you're also eligible. Blue Water Navy survivors and certain dependents may be entitled to benefits if the veteran was exposed, right? So if the veteran was exposed, there may be, if they qualify for the presumption, if they're inside that 12 nautical mile limit, and they passed from a service-connected, one of the presumptive service connection disabilities, right? Then they do have, the surviving spouse can file a DIC claim, and we talked about that a little earlier, based on that the presumption is that the veteran was exposed, and the presumption is that the condition that they passed from, if it was, say, one of the service-connected, you know, there's lung cancer, prostate cancer, diabetes, right, type 2 diabetes, Parkinson's. If any of these are a contributing factor to the veteran's death, including other cancers, right, any of the ones that are presumptive, if they are, the veteran passed from that, then the surviving spouse can file a DIC claim. Doesn't matter how long ago that was. We just have to show on the death certificate that one of those conditions was the cause or a contributing factor, and we can file a claim based on that. The VA is not going to go back, you know, to the time that that veteran died and pay that lump sum. They're going to go from, you know, but if that veteran did file a claim a long time ago, I think there's going to be a lot of challenges to how the VA is paying these things out. We'll have to see how that all plays out.
Tim, can you explain the brown water?
So the brown water are veterans that served in the waterways of Vietnam. So they're well within the 12 miles, and most brown water ships are most of them, they're still working, I think, on some of them. I don't even think they have all of them, but most of them are of record on the website for the Agent Orange ship list. If if you feel yours isn't, or that you served on the inland waterways and there is no record of it, then the proof becomes a little tougher, because it's not what you know, it's what you can prove, right? You have to be able to prove these things. So again, one of those claims where your testimony is going to be important, you're going to want to take it to that BVA appeal. So you could tell the judge under oath, hey, here's what happened, here's where I was. There's no record. Here, here's possibly why. I don't know why there's no record, but here's where I was, and here's, so trying to get in front of that appeal process is probably the most important whenever your testimony is going to be important to creating that nexus. Yeah?
I was just going to say, on the 12 nautical mile, when I pulled up my ship's log, it was there. I just Googled it and it was there.
Right.
Plus an average destroyer off the coast of Vietnam. I think our 5-inch 38s had about a range of 14 miles. Most fire missions were well within that 12 mile
Sure.
range. If there is no deck logs available, sometimes just your armament. Well, if you can prove through your cruise books
right.
that you were firing in that area, so.
Right, and so that's the, that's going to be the thing, right? Trying to prove that you're inside that area, and there's going to be a lot of different ways. They're looking at the log books now to try to get, ascertain which ones that were in there, right? But that's not going to tell the whole story. There's going to be those that are going to have to find other ways, or try to find some type of information, The Navy Historical and Heritage Command is a great website to try and look for all kinds of things. It may cost you money to request certain documents, but if you search that site and you find something that you think is relevant, hey, it's worth the $100 or $200 you might have to pay to get, a big section of, logs while you were on that ship, right? So just something to think about. Yes?
I'd like to add that Larry's talking about the ships. I was on a converted barge, YRBM, on the middle of the Mekong River, and that is also a vessel that is on the list.
Oh, so that's on there as well. So they've done a pretty good job with the list, I think. But again, not everything. In a perfect world, they're all there, right? So there may be issues where we're trying to prove something that we're having difficulty proving. I would say I would still file a claim. I would still file that claim and see what the response from the VA is, right? Like I tell everyone, let them say no. Let them give you a denial. Let them tell you no and why they're saying no, right? That's the key. Why are they saying no? And how can we go about making that no into a yes, right? Into an approved, so. But the Blue Water Navy, like I said, it just started. and I just had a veteran that got a letter that said that his is on hold until they get further instruction, which is funny because we submitted it in, a little ahead of the game in December, and he got that letter, and we're like, okay, well, maybe his next letter he gets, they're going to say they're working on it. But this is going to be a very important part of the VA funding, and so they changed in order to fund this, they changed the funding fee, right? So if you're not a Service Connect, the VA homeowner, the home loan funding fee. So they added a 0.15% to that funding fee for certain veterans that are getting that VA home loan in order to fund this, because they know it's going to cost, and I hate when they use that excuse. Oh, well, the cost. Well, you didn't care about the cost when you start a war. Let's not worry about it when we're taking care of the veterans. So this is going to be a learning process. This is going to be in flux. It's going to be changing. I'm sure they're going to change how they do the payments, because this is what I read on the site. If you had a previously denied claim and you resubmit your claim, the effective date will be determined on a case-by-case basis.
Meaning it would be retro.
Meaning possibly retro, right?
Possibly.
Right.
Yeah.
So they put that in there, but when I read the law, it reads pretty different to me. It says, that if you filed a claim and were previously denied, they're going to go back to it up to, I think, 1985 is the farthest they're going to go back. But yet this I pulled off the website yesterday. So they're going to look at it case by case. So a lot of these I know are going to be challenged. There's going to be a lot of challenges going on. So we're just going to, like I said, we're going to have to see how all this develops. But I think if we didn't get an earlier the earliest effective date of claim from someone that was previously denied, I would immediately file a higher level review and talk to a decision review officer, and I'll say, why didn't this go earlier, right? So, yes.
I noticed you never mentioned the Korean War. Is that forgotten now or what?
No. So the Korean War was in there.
I haven't seen it. Okay.
Well, let's go back.
Forgotten war, remember?
Yeah.
There you go.
Korean contract.
Okay, fine print.
It's right there. They're eligible for all the same benefits everyone else is.
Oh, thank you for that.
You bet. Everything I'm talking about encompasses the Korean War veterans as well. Would you like to discuss it a little more?
No, I think you've done it.
Thank you.
Tim,
Yes.
You haven't mentioned the program where they push the medical care out to the...
So okay, the Office of Community Care. So those that were in VA healthcare, do you remember the Choice program? What a disaster, right? I mean, Choice program was horrible. People were getting collections, stuff thrown into collections that weren't getting paid. And so the new Office of Community Care is doing a much better job. So it's being administered by Tri-West, and it's no longer HealthNet. And they're doing a much better job of getting these appointments out in the community much faster, getting things paid much quicker. They were actually only supposed to be on it temporarily, which was kind of frustrating. But now it seems like they have the contract now going forward for a little while. And they're doing a really good job as far as these appointments. So if you're in VA healthcare and you have a need, you have transportation issues that you can't get to the VA, or health issues, or it just makes sense that you're using a specialist close to home and that continues. If they're part of that Office of Community Care system, then you can request from your primary care doctor at the VA to be that these appointments continue locally, or that you get a local provider based on one of the criteria for the program. If they can't see you within, they changed it. It used to be 30 days. I think it's like 25 now or something. But if you call the VA and they can't see you within a certain time frame, they can schedule that out in the community, the Office of Community Care, and you can be seen by a local provider.
How do you apply for that?
You have to be in the VA healthcare system. You go through your primary care doctor. Everything goes through primary care. You talk to your primary care about wanting to go through Office of Community Care for this issue, or when you call for an appointment and they say they can't see you, the specialist, they did the referral, they can't see you, say, I would like to use the Office of Community Care, let my primary care provider refer me to that program, and they will refer and do that referral to that program. And then what it is, so it's the same thing like for, if you're in the VA healthcare system and you're going to get glasses, the VA doesn't do the glasses anymore. They're going to refer you out into a community provider, and the community provider will do the eye test, and the VA will pay a certain amount of money for the glasses.
Does it cover dental too?
No. For dental, now they're trying to get that changed too, but for right now, if you're 100% service connected, you can get dental. Or if you had a traumatic injury to your teeth while you're in, you could request that that your doctor put in a claim for treatment purposes only, and that goes through the benefits. They'll look at the record and say, yes, we're gonna prove it for treatment purposes only.
Does the website va.gov explain all that?
So it does, because they also have a portion there where you can get a policy through, and I believe it is Delta Dental or MetLife, I believe, are the two companies that have policies for dental coverage through the VA. So you could pay for coverage through the VA, but they don't do dental. It is, if you're 100% service connected, or if you had trauma to the teeth, you can request your primary care to put in a request for treatment purposes only because you had trauma, and they will put in that request, because that has to be approved through the benefit side for treatment only, and then they can refer you to that to a dental provider.
But TRICARE has dental, right?
TRICARE, yeah, that is for retirees. I believe you have to pay for that, if I'm not mistaken, for that coverage. But
No, it's for any.
yeah, any retiree.
20
Yeah,
years.
they just,
Yep.
they just changed those, it's now under the government employee company, yeah. Yeah, they just changed it. US government employees now. It's not TRICARE, it's,
Oh, they changed it?
yeah.
Huh.
That's where you mentioned the two companies, Delta and
MetLife?
they are under the government employee.
Right. And that's who the VA uses for, you can pay into that and get dental coverage to save a little bit of money, obviously, on your any dental procedures that you're going to need.
Is there still a mileage limit for this?
For the Office of Community Care? Yes, but what they're doing is they've changed it. It's not as the crow flies. They look at it as, depending on your area where you're at, right? So they look at it as how the distance, how long it takes.
Do they take account traffic jams?
They actually are supposed to be, they're actually supposed to look at all that stuff, based on real drive time. And based on a computer program that they use that tells, yeah. So they're changing that as well. And that's all going to be, the Office of Community Care is a work in progress too, but it's much better now than it has been in the past. So Office of Community Care now, which used to be the choice program, it's expanded a little bit. It's much better. They're paying, so you're not getting calls from collections, right? For like choice program did, and getting hits to your credit report because the VA wasn't paying. A lot of the problem was that the providers were billing the VA directly, and they're supposed to bill that third party, right? So they go and they bill the VA, and then everything's lost in the shuffle, and then they bill them again and again, and then they're like, well, we tried it, we didn't get paid. So.
I got actually a couple questions, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
One is the transportation provided to the VA hospital.
Yes.
I volunteer down at the VA hospital, and every time I go in to register, they have a little guy sitting there who provides the transportation to veterans who don't have their own vehicle, and need transportation, and there's a certain mileage limit, I can't remember exactly what it was. I've talked to the guy there a couple times. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I just know it's tough to get it, right? It's tough to get those rides because you call and you, a lot of times that is a phone line that you call directly at the VA, and veterans that I've referred to that have a tough time getting a call back or getting a ride just due to the fact that they're overwhelmed with the calls. However, there is a program that is in the works through Denver Regional Council of Government. It's called Ride Alliance. What it is Broomfield Easy Ride is part of this, okay? All these local providers that provide transportation have gotten together and created a software hub where they can all talk to each other and coordinate rides for veterans for medical appointments. Now, this has been an ongoing, it's through a grant from the VA, so the process has been ongoing, and we're looking at March, I think, is when they're going to roll out a test phase. So there's only certain of these transportation providers that are going to be part of this test phase. Broomfield's one of them. So Broomfield Easy Ride will be part of this test phase for Ride Alliance, which will provide rides for veterans to medical appointments. Right now, the only thing we have is Cultivate, right, which utilizes volunteers. So if you need to get to medical appointments, if you're a veteran, you can call and get on. There's paperwork you got to fill out to get on the list, and they utilize volunteers to get you to and from medical appointments, right? But the issue becomes if there is mobility issues, then it becomes tougher because these are people's cars. They're not set up for mobility issue or mobility impaired veterans, right? So if you have a mobility issue, then it becomes tougher to get, Cultivate to be able to assist you with that. This Ride Alliance, I'm hoping, by this summer they're rolling it out, and it's going to be really a game changer. The word is, the main thing is to get the word out to the veterans once this really starts, that this is available. Because they've been told no for so long that there's no transportation, that they just stop asking, right? So this is going to be very important once it rolls out. It is going to be, yes, it's, I'm not sure all the counties that are involved in it, but it's a pretty big project. So I think that it's going to be most of the coverage of the metro area, I believe, is going to be part of it, which is great. Yes.
At any given time, there were 3 carriers on Yankee Station.
Mm-hmm.
It was a enlisted man on a carrier that started the whole Blue Water Navy,
Mm-hmm.
whole. Do you think they'll eventually get benefits to the guys that were outside that 12 mile?
It's been so long just to get the benefits to this point. I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know. I would say that if they're outside that 12 miles, they're going to have a heck of a time showing or proving that somehow they were exposed to that chemical, right? So I don't know that for sure if they're going to, and I know the Australian Navy commissioned a study, and there was all that information that came out, right? That the viable routes of exposure through the reverse osmosis water system that the Navy used. So there's a lot of information there, but it just has been such a battle to get to this point, and they drew the line at that 12 nautical miles that I don't know. I really don't know. Yes?
I would suggest to everybody who has anybody in their family or knows someone who is in that situation that John just mentioned, to get in touch with the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Association, just put those initials in, and get on their case, because they're still a viable organization,
Mm-hmm.
still accepting donations.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, they're still fighting that fight.
Yeah. To open it up. Yeah, and I'm sure they are. And this is obviously a major victory, and now the shift has gone to where they're trying to gather those logbook entries to show the people that are eligible now. So yeah, I think that it'll be an ongoing battle, but to me, the 12 nautical mile thing, I think to get it for someone that's outside there, it's going to be tough. But yeah, absolutely, I would still file a claim. If it gets denied, it gets denied, but I would file it for sure. Yep. Any other questions that we might have? Yeah.
Thank you for your service. to
Oh,
us.
you bet. You as well. Thank you very much. So,
I do have one more question.
yes.
I'd like to do the, what do you know about the hyperbaric oxygen treatment? And I've heard rumors that they're doing studies down in San Antonio to possibly include that in VA.
So the VA still does not cover that, and I don't know why. They really should. But the Rocky Mountain Hyperbaric Association here in Colorado, they run on donations. So it's a great organization to donate to go to a fundraiser. I think they do a fundraiser once a year at like the Melting Pot or something, one of these restaurants where they do a fundraiser where you pay and you go and you eat and you network with other veterans. But the studies show that that's a great a great source of treatment for a lot of different conditions, right? Why the VA doesn't cover it, I don't know, but that organization's a great organization to get in touch with if you feel that is one of the treatments that can benefit you. Until the VA figures out, if they're going to cover that or not, that's the best option that I could think of.
Right, and it's one of only 3 or 4 that provide it.
Yeah.
We work with the HBOT, like Rocky Mountain Hyperbaric. They've actually had Australian service members come over and undergo the therapy. But my question really is regarding, I've heard that they are the VA, through probably the Air Force or the Army, is conducting hyperbaric treatment as not an experiment, what's the word, study.
Research,
Yeah. Down in San Antonio, have you heard anything about that?
No, I have not. So that that may be where they're going to get their research done to find out, yes, we should be using this type of treatment. Another great organization for anyone that may have a brain type injury is the Marcus Institute of Brain Health, right? So they do great work there. As far as they'll do an assessment on a veteran, and if they feel that they want to accept them into that program, I do think that they bill insurance or whatever, but I don't think that the veteran has to pay a lot out of pocket in order to get that treatment, the different types of treatments that they have available. And they run a series of tests, a battery of tests to see, if there is, underlying issues. Because a lot of times the VA, for the veterans that were in blasts of any sort, in a blast radius or near an IED, the VA, if you file a claim for that, the VA is going to do certain tests, and if they feel that you're okay cognitively from the battery of tests, then they're going to say, okay, well, we're going to give you 0%, because what they do is they rate the issues that you get because of the TBI, right? So cognitive impairment, those types of things are what they rate. So what I would suggest that if someone was denied that they try to get into the Marcus Institute and see if there's if they could do the assessment that they probably need. Yeah.
Well, Tim, thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you.
One of our challenges.
Oh yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
And we'll look at getting Tim back in March. But also, if you'd like to see us try an outreach and get in someone from the VA hospital outreach or their clinics and other things that would help explain further what resources are available, please let us know, and we'll go ahead and try and arrange that. And I know, John, you and Jan have put together a very excellent sheet of support resources through the VA. So we're going to make more copies of that available too. But anything that would help explain this jungle, stuff out here, let us know, and let's see what we can do to bring in resources and talk about that. So again, thank you very much for joining us, and stick around and talk with Tim. He has